it's 9 a.m. and you've made meds for one patient. And I would look down and there was just all of this garbage. And so that was 9 a.m. I hadn't even probably had my first full cup of coffee. And then I did that again all day.
I'm Heather Grish, and this is the Wisdom of the Body podcast. This podcast explores the idea of body intelligence as the real key to learning the knowledge of life, or what we call Ayurveda in the ancient language of Sanskrit. We do that by connecting with today's creative leaders and experts who will help you listen to your body, trust your gut, and live in deeper harmony with nature. Come join me as we unlock the golden door to clear, direct perception and become very deep listeners. You can find the Wisdom of the Body podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also follow us by joining my email at heathergrish.com or on Instagram at heathergrish. I know you're going to love this podcast, so take a second right now to subscribe. Today, I'm here with Erika Kimball, the founder and principal of Kimball Sustainable Healthcare, a consultancy specializing in sustainability strategy and resource conservation for hospitals and healthcare. Erika is a sustainability leader who's working to reduce the environmental impact of healthcare. She advises hospitals and healthcare companies on sustainability and climate action, healthy materials, circular economy principles, and sustainable policy and practices. She's a nurse by training, and she takes a holistic approach to healthcare change management, building the systems, relationships, and capacity to achieve better environmental outcomes. We're so lucky we have people like Erika in the world, and I'm really grateful that you are here with us today, Erika.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I sought you out. I was like, I want to talk with somebody who's doing sustainability in healthcare, because I'll sort of flash back maybe about year and a half at this point, when the pandemic first started and masks and plastic barriers were going up everywhere. And my mind did not go to, oh, great, this is keeping us safe. Even though, yes, I'm very much aware that those things do protect us from viral particles and all that. It's just that I started seeing masks all over the ground. And then my brain went a little further into the future of visualizing the accumulation of all this material and what would happen to it in the environment once it was done being used. So my thought process was like, okay, yeah, I want this to be safe now, but what's going to happen afterwards? And so I started asking around, and I actively sought out meeting you. So that's why we're here today. And I'm really happy to have met you and learn about the work that you're doing, and would love to start off with why you think it's so important that we all know about this, even people who don't work in the healthcare system.
Yes, great question. And I think the materials that we've had to use in the pandemic is a really good encapsulation of how my work is focused in healthcare. And so, what happened with the pandemic is that a lot of the materials that are used inside the healthcare setting were now needed and required in the general public sphere. And so, what we saw were an uptick in single use disposable plastics. And part of that is a materials problem. Plastics are used widely for a wide number of reasons. They are durable, they're flexible, and they are cost effective. So those are the things that make plastic a really valuable material. And so it's been used widely in the healthcare area. The downside of plastic, we now know that it doesn't go away. It's hundreds and maybe 1,000 years from today. Plastics that we use once now will be breaking down, reabsorbed into the environment. We also know that plastics are made from fossil fuels, which is an existential challenge to all of us. And they're made from toxic chemicals, that's combine both of those and you get plastics. And so the chemicals that go into plastic, they are not great for health. And so from a logistical standpoint, plastics, they're not readily recyclable. Even if you had a perfectly recyclable plastic product, even if you do everything right to get it from the recycling bin to a final processor, plastics degrade in quality as the recycling process happens. You only get a few runs of a recycled plastic before it becomes like, I don't know, like a plant pot or something. And so, given all of that, it's not an ideal material to use anymore, especially when you're looking at single-use disposable plastics. In all of our communities, single-use disposable utensils are being banned, and straws and bags. And healthcare is tricky, but we know that there are better materials out there. And so, what I do is help build the systems inside of healthcare to create options to things like single use disposable plastics.
Wow. I mean, I don't know if the audience feels this, but this is really heavy stuff. I mean, this is big. I mean, I recently read this book. You've probably read it because you're in this field, but I recently started getting more interested in plastics. And there was this book called Plastic, A Toxic Love Story that I recently read. And it was talking about when plastic materials were developed for hospitals. And you'd know more about the year that this happened, but say like an IV bag or an IV tube or little tubes that have to go into a little baby that was born prematurely in a neonatal unit. Once these plastic materials were developed that were, like you said, very durable and flexible and cost effective, and suddenly actually enabled quite a few things to happen from I guess you could call it efficacy perspective in saving lives. And that the nurses in particular were very excited to get plastic because they weren't worried about breaking glass all the time because apparently they were using glass. So there's this sort of really tragic thing that I think about the plastics in medicine right now, like you said, because of the environmental impact and what happens when these materials get into the environment and the microplastics and all that, which I'm sure we could talk about. But first, I want to recognize that this is a really heavy topic for people to even think about. And if we have any listeners that have never even thought about this before, it could be kind of blowing their mind. And it can get kind of a little depressing to talk about plastic. So I just want to put that out there. I would love to hear from you, Erika. I guess, how did you get into this work? Because you used to be a nurse. How did you get into sustainability counseling from there?
Yes. So plastics is super depressing, and we don't have to solve that problem today. But before I talk about my background, I will add some good news, which is what I do for a living is work on the solutions. And so the good news is that we have the tools and we have the information needed to build a more sustainable supply materials library for healthcare, right? There are alternatives to plastic. There are breakthroughs being done in green chemistry. And so it's really a matter of how do you shift an industry? And so you do that through, first of all, there's an economic challenge. And so, how do you make better materials more affordable? And so, one thing that you do is you conserve, right? You've got to cut down on the amount of waste that's going through the healthcare system. And so, one thing that I do is help build programs that make conservation easy and build it into the way that we operate in the healthcare setting. The second thing is there's a quality need. How do you meet the safety and quality demands of healthcare with alternative materials? And so there's reusable products, there's reprocessable products, there are ways to do high quality care without overdoing it on single use disposables. And then the third thing, and this is a big opportunity for healthcare, is that healthcare as an industry is led by systems thinkers, holistic healers, and innovators. And so there's this opportunity to innovate. We don't have to go back to glass syringes. Better materials are on the horizon. And so, how can you leverage the innovation and the market presence of healthcare to really push through materials that align with the goals of healthcare? So that's the work that I do. The way that I got into this was quite organically. I'm a nurse by background, and I was working in critical care, and that was a great job. I really loved it. But I would be making my morning, medications in the med room, and it's 9 a.m. and you've made meds for one patient. And I would look down and there was just all of this garbage. And so that was 9 a.m. I hadn't even probably had my first full cup of coffee. And then I did that again, all day. And so I'll work hard in the healthcare setting to deliver quality care, but I knew that there had to be a better way, that we didn't have to make so much waste in delivering the care that we did. And so I just started championing quality improvement projects inside of my nursing unit. I created a supply collection program to, collect supplies that were deemed contaminated or had been prepared for an OR case, so clean packaged supplies, and would donate those to charity to keep them out of the waste bin. And then I started working on waste prevention measures, process improvement. How do you work with supply chain to stock things in a way where we're not ordering supplies in bulk so that we're not wasting, from the order. And then I also started working on behavior change. I emailed the CEO of my hospital and started a green team. And my first go at it, I wasn't very good at it, but I was pretty honored that people showed up and did the work, And so I think it speaks to the opportunity for sustainability in healthcare. We're in the caring business, and there's good work to be done to improve environmental outcomes. And so I got into sustainability by simply doing sustainability work. When I started leading a green team, I recognized that I was not great at management because I'd always been happily a bedside nurse. And so I went to grad school, I went to business school, and I got my MBA in sustainable management. And so that led me to a consulting career working with health hospitals to build these programs inside of the healthcare setting.
That's really funny. I have someone in my family who did the complete opposite, who actually went to business school and then later became a nurse. You two should connect. I'll have to connect you two. So you've touched on this already, and I'm sure there are a lot more that you could expand on. So this is, I think, a question that's worth it. What do you see as the basic challenges of sustainability and environmentalism in healthcare?
Yes. So I think that when you think of the big challenge, so, at the high level systems level, healthcare is built for stability and it's built for reliability. And that's what makes it safe to show up as a patient when you come in for care. And so structurally, it makes change really difficult in the healthcare setting because everyone operates on standards and practices and reliability. And so the opportunity is to investigate those standards and look for opportunities to align because underneath that level of reliability is a dedication to quality, to positive health outcomes, to safety, and to value. And sustainability is quality, safety, and value. And so it takes work, but the real opportunity is to align your sustainability work in healthcare with that dedication to quality because the practices reinforce one another.
What kind of environmental impacts is the healthcare system having?
Yes. So it always starts with bad news, and then I try to follow it up with good news because I think that one of the secrets to creating change in the healthcare industry is persistence and an undying optimism. So the bad news is the healthcare system in the US is responsible for about 10% of greenhouse gas emissions. Healthcare generates about 5.9 million, and that's a rough count, 5.9 million tons of waste a year in the United States, and about 25% of that is plastic. Healthcare buildings are generally use about 2.5 times the energy of a commensurate commercial building. And that's, you're talking about hospitals at that point. And so those are really big environmental impacts. And it behooves us to commit ourselves to continual improvement to really drive down the environmental impact of healthcare. So that's the bad news. The good news is that healthcare is about 20% of GDP. And so what that means is as healthcare does this sustainability work, they really have the opportunity to shift big changes just because to invest in sustainability means that you're creating bigger change in the economy. And so by the challenges of implementing sustainability in healthcare, you really have to get it right. There's just a high level of quality and safety that have to be met. And so if you can get it right in the healthcare setting, really what you're doing is paving a path for achievable sustainability, in broader society and across industries.
So your feeling is that if healthcare can get it right, it can really have quite a huge impact on the overall ecosystem. Thank you so much for those statistics. And when we had spoken a while back and you told me those, I was like, oh my gosh, really? I mean, it made sense, but then I never had anybody because people are so focused on the whole, I'm vegan because of the greenhouse gases. And there are things that people are doing in their day to day lives that they believe are affecting the environment. But all of us are using the healthcare system, some of us more than others. And we are not really thinking about how that's affecting the environment. And, I guess just to give people a real life sense of this, right? Because you worked in the system, so you have more of a sense of what's happening, but you work in the system now as well. If you were to guess, what percentage of materials used in a hospital setting, for example, are actually made of plastic? Do you have any idea?
I don't have an idea. And because my background came from the clinical side of things, I am hyper focused on that setting. It's where I came into sustainability work. And so if you look at the clinical supply chain, it's for many reasons, it's just the way that things have gone. There's just a high degree of single use plastics. And it's because the materials can be traced. They are made in a way where, they can be used and then disposed of. And it's clean and it's safe and it's fast. And so that's how things came to be in the clinical side. Again, like we now have more evidence. And so we need to add some qualifiers to what we deem is the best material to get the job done. And so that speaks to an opportunity. It speaks to an opportunity for improved practice, improved materials, and improved innovation. Hospitals and healthcare systems at large, they're like little cities, right? There's the transportation, how we all get to work every day. There are, a huge part of the supply chain is even like the food, right? We buy energy and water to keep the buildings running. And so when you think about something, I think there's been a lot of work done in sustainable food procurement. And I think it's a really nice, tangible example of how you can really use the investment of healthcare to help build local systems, right? You know, by buying sustainable, organic, really what you're doing, right, is building capacity for those practices on farms, in the community, in the economy. And so there's this real opportunity to just help steering the ship in a direction that aligns the operations and the investments of healthcare with the goals of healthcare. And it is happening. Change is always slow in healthcare and it's not always readily evident, but change is happening as healthcare really, steps to the forefront of environmental action and climate action.
Yeah, and it's interesting because being a holistic healer that uses herbal medicine in my practice, since you were talking about building local systems, I studied Indian medicine with herbs that grew in India, right? And some of them are being grown in other countries and continents now. These herbs, some of them, can only grow at the certain elevation in the Himalayas because it's the highest place in the world. And there's certain herbs that can't grow or don't grow other places, but it's happening more. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that, because we're having to ship these herbs all over the world to get to people. And I have actually had certain companies contact me and want me to like endorse their products, whether it's like some kind of food product from India or an herb or something like that. And I'm like, well, what is it packaged in? Because it is a values match for me to have sustainable packaging. But it just seems like that's really difficult for these kinds of companies to even find packaging that is very effective for shipping things so far, especially when it's food product, want little critters getting in there. It seems like the packaging industry is really needing to go through a big transition, would you say?
Most definitely. And so, yes, and they are. I just got a refresh of face masks in the mail, and the packaging, it says that it's compostable. I'm thinking through if I'm going to try to actually compost it in the worm bin in my backyard. But I am going to check in with the company to ask. And so, green chemistry is a thing, right? I think that big challenge right now is a market challenge. And so, I think that what you're describing is a practice that I wholeheartedly endorse, which is you have to ask for what you want. I think that it's a slow process, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And I think that it's that level of engagement, and also it's like one person at a time establishing a vision for how things could be. And so I'm a big fan of the ask, knowing that most oftentimes the answer will not be yes.
Wow, you must be really thoroughly prepared for a lot of beating your head against a wall in your life.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about what makes there's sustainability knowledge, there's healthcare knowledge, there's definitely a lot of work that I've done over the years to build the systems that make it easy to implement changes in the challenging environment of healthcare. But my hard won specialty is change management in healthcare. And I've learned that by just being told no a lot, right? I mean, change is hard. And so to ask for change as part of your job is to try to find a way to yes, because, change is hard.
I want to thank you for listening to this show. It brings me great pleasure to provide this content to you. I also want to let you know that I'll be making some very amazing announcements soon. And if you're not already on my email list, then I encourage you to go over to my website and subscribe to my email list so that I can keep you informed about these announcements that are going to be coming up very soon. So my website is heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And I look forward to getting these important announcements to you very soon and connecting. I can't remember if I told you this before, but I actually used to be head of product development for a health insurance company. And so I really, really get what you're saying. Because, product development in a company where it's all about systems and processes is really about getting people to change. And it's quite a big challenge. And especially when working in an industry that's so well established and in many ways is doing really great work. So it's hard to get people to shift. So a little more about this healthy material thing, because I love how you mentioned I didn't realize green chemistry was a thing. One of the things I did learn in that book that I was talking about earlier, the Plastics a Toxic Love Story, was written in 2010, and she quoted the American Chemistry Council as having raised like $120 million in 2010. And that I work for a nonprofit that was working on fundraising at the time. And I was like, we were only able to raise X amount, and the chemistry people that are creating all the plastics for the world are raising so much more. So I was really happy to hear that, green chemistry is a thing. That's something I'll need to learn more about. But first of all, like, what is green chemistry? I don't know if you feel like you can talk about the specifics of that, because what makes a material healthy, I can tell you in India, they're still using leeches on bodies. And even though that sounds gross, it's not going to deliver microplastics into the environment. So I'm curious, like, what is considered a healthy material to be used in a healthcare setting?
So I'm not a material scientist, so I will speak on a broader scale. But I think that if you look from a 30,000-foot view, the vision of healthy materials, and this is, the vision of my work in healthcare, which is healthy materials used in optimal amounts and processed in ways that benefit the environment at end of life. And so bioplastics are a thing. You can make plastics out of natural inputs in place of fossil fuels. I think not to, again, I'm not super familiar with all the barriers, but I really do think that a big part is just a market barrier. They're expensive. And so, again, healthcare is a really good environment to examine this through because we could implement a lot of healthy materials in the healthcare setting, but if it's more expensive, you're driving up the cost of care, right? And so it's this very controlled environment. And so it's a puzzle to solve. How do you improve the materials that are coming into the building without, driving up supply chain costs more? And so the first step of that is conservation. And I think that's a lot of work that I do in healthcare, which is how do we waste less? How do we take better care of our things? There are, along the lines of the focus now on decarbonizing the healthcare sector, if you look to, started, of course, in the EU, but we're really looking at implementing circular economy principles in the healthcare setting. And so the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a nice model for a circular economy. And what they show is that, on one side, there's technical inputs, and that's materials that you extract from the ground. So that would be your plastics, that would be your metals. And on the technical side of the circular economy, you want to maintain those materials for their maximum life cycle. So, how can you collect materials after use, repair them, rebuild them so that you're getting the maximum life cycle out of those materials? The other side of that equation is the biological cycle. So, there's the second part of that circular economy model. And the biological cycle, right, is natural inputs. And so that's food waste, organic materials. And so that's your compost bin, right? That's going into the biological cycle. And what it's showing is you're using the material once and then it's breaking down, and as it biodegrades, going back into the natural sphere of things. And so the thought that's coming out of the circular economy model is that there's an opportunity to shift more of, if an item is not suitable for being used for a long period of time, if you can't have a reusable, then maybe we should be shifting to biological inputs so that when the material breaks down, instead of having a plastic fork that sticks around for 100 years, how can we make that out of natural materials so that it's biodegrading and going back into the earth? And the technology to process these things, we don't have all the solutions all in one place 100% right now, but we're aiming toward that. And I think that when you look at things like green chemistry, really it's a matter of choosing healthier inputs, choosing healthier materials so that if they are sticking around with us for a long time through reuse, you want to make sure that they're safe and they're healthy to use. And if it's a product made to biodegrade, you just want to make sure that as that product breaks down, that those product inputs are again contributing to the overall health of our system.
Yeah, I may have shared this on the podcast before, but when I was in India years ago, I was hiking in the morning around the foot of this mountain. It was like 6 a.m. and I was with a group, and it was kind of like a pilgrimage walk. And I saw this woman come out of her house with a garbage bag. It was full, and she walked across the street from her house and she chucked the garbage bag into the woods across the street from her house. And then she walked right back into her house and shut the door. And I was so mad. I was so mad. I was like about to yell at her. I was so upset when she did that. And then my brain went back to this time of my life where like I remembered throwing trash on the ground. And then I was like, okay, it's not the urge that we want. I mean, sometimes it's like that's part of it, this urge to kind of like just get rid of things all the time, that the level of that, that's happening has to be checked. But the issue is really that we created materials that take a really long time to break down in nature. And when they do, they interrupt our health, as in the microplastics and things like endocrine disruption. And like you're saying, this idea of talking about how healthcare is this sort of stable entity, right? That's not super flexible. And it's like the materials have to be able to match the rate at which we're all changing so that we can continue to regenerate, so that we don't end up with these materials hanging around way too long and starting to clog things up in the environment. Literally, is like it's going to end up like Wall-E, that, cartoon movie. So, what are some of the sustainable policies and practices that, like, from a practical level, are being implemented now in healthcare?
Absolutely. So, one huge push is to really re-examine the opportunity for reusables so that what are the items that can practically and in a safe and quality manner be reused in the healthcare setting. And so we have reusable linen. It's a great system to optimize on to help create framework for quality reuse in the healthcare setting. There's a lot of OR supplies, operating room supplies, and trays and gowns and things of this nature that hospitals and health systems are really looking into how they can reintroduce reusables in a safe manner. The second thing is there's a practice called reprocessing, and it's kind of taking single-use disposable supplies and rebuilding them and making new single-use disposable supplies. And so you're still getting that original product, but it's using the parts of a nearly identical previous original product. And so it's a great model that we could expand upon in the healthcare setting. This, of course, is all on the clinical side. I think, the same thing is going on there's reusable curtains, reusable serviceware in the hospital. I think that healthcare providers are starting to take a better look at maximizing the useful life cycle of products. I think that inside of those practices, there's this very practical challenge and how do we get the most material value, but also economic value out of these products? And there's just really nuts and bolts challenges like making sure that clinicians get the item in the right bin when they're done using it, making sure that that bin gets serviced and makes it to the right spot for collection, and just making sure that the materials are collected and managed in a quality manner, making sure that there's standard work around how those materials are managed. And so within that, really what you're doing is building the capacity for healthcare to create an alternative to the waste bin.
Yeah, thank you so much. It sounds like there's a lot of area of opportunity. And I mean, how many of all the hospitals and, like, what percentage of, is this like a thing that hospitals and healthcare systems are setting as goals now? Like, how common is it?
Most certainly. And I think that you can look at different healthcare facilities. Again, my work is very focused on materials health and materials management. But if you look overall, health systems are making commitments to climate action, to sustainable practices, to carbon neutrality. And within those goals, there are zero waste goals, there are sustainable purchasing goals, as well as sustainable energy, water, and transportation. And so this is a growing practice in healthcare. I think leaders have been out this for 20 plus years. I think Kaiser Permanente was early leader in this space, the Cleveland Clinic as well. But there are many leaders in the field. And so what's happening in healthcare is this really wonderful shift in focus to not just how do we treat illness, but how do we really achieve health? What are the social determinants of health? And part of the social determinants of health are environmental determinants of health. And so there is this shift happening where hospitals are both looking at how patients in the community, what are the environmental conditions that are impacting patients in the community? And part of that, right, is how do we operate in a way that supports those health goals? And so there is a shift happening, and it's a nice time to be in the business. There's really smart work to be done. And we are in need of a radical change. And so it's kind of an all hands on deck moment. But who else besides healthcare to really help shift the way that our economy operates to one that supports health?
Yeah, I mean, all of my friends who work in hospital settings or on the front line, I find, whether they're doctors or nurses, that there's this feeling that they're just dealing with the problems once they come into the hospital and they can't really make an impact on the things that are going on, that, like you were saying, the social determinants of health, that a lot of the things that are influencing people coming into the healthcare setting. And I would imagine this would be a really big area for medical professionals to want to get involved in, because this is something that there are known health effects and there really could be a difference made. So I love how you call this an all hands on deck moment. And also, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I did a lot of work in the dental industry. And it seems in some ways that dentistry was always, it seemed to not go to this level of single use the way a lot of the other healthcare system did. I'm wondering if there's any learning being done from dentistry in this regard.
I think that there's a lot of decisions that go behind material selection. And I think it's a matter of, again, building the systems necessary to support better materials in the hospital. So whether that is reusables, whether it's, compostable products, how to get those out of the hospital in a way that is clean and healthy. Really, it's a matter of will, it's a matter of economics, and it's a matter of having the tools in place so that it's easy to do the right thing with the materials in hand. And so the opportunity is there, and we kind of have all the tools that we need. It's just a matter of putting them together and really, leveraging the dedication to quality and the heft of the healthcare industry to make those changes.
Amazing. If there was one change that the healthcare system could implement, and this can be a short answer, that would really make a dramatic effect on the environment, what would that be?
I think meaningful dedication to climate action, I think that's where it's at. The Lancet is a medical journal, and they say that climate change is both the existential threat to health outcomes of our lifetime, but it's also an unparalleled opportunity to improve both health and health equity. And I think the biggest opportunity is for healthcare providers, hospitals, health systems to make a commitment and work towards decarbonizing the healthcare industry. Because if we decarbonize the healthcare industry, we decarbonize the economy. And that's a huge, huge benefit. That's real health outcomes right there. So that's the opportunity.
She's got big dreams. Erica, what does the wisdom of the body mean to you?
I think that my background in nursing is that of holistic care, and that viewpoint, it stays with me. Obviously, I was a nurse for a lot of years, and I think that the day that I figured out that I was care planning for hospitals and not doing this like business plans and strategy seemed so foreign to me, and one day I realized that I was care planning for hospitals and health systems and healthcare companies. And it was a huge relief because I was able to merge these two models in my mind. And I think that systems change. It's really changing people, right? It's changing behaviors. And so it's that holistic approach that's really going to make lasting change. And healthcare really embodies that. And I think that the opportunity to create these changes, starting with healthcare, I think it's a really great opportunity to align the goals of sustainability, the outcomes, and really the capacity. Because when you think about sustainability, really what we're working towards is we're working towards human health. The earth's going to be fine without us. Really, what we're going towards is that we're all able to enjoy this sustainable planet. And so I think that health outcomes is really where the rubber meets the road in sustainability. So the wisdom of the body, I think, is just really grounding the approach to change and change management in this like holistic knowledge.
Erica, if somebody wants to get in touch with you to learn more about this and how they can either get involved or have you come work with them in their healthcare setting, how should they reach out to you?
Yes. So I am available at my website, which is kimballsustainablehealthcare.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not really on social media. I have time to work or I have time for a web presence. So those are the two places you can find me.
Erika, I'm so grateful that you took the time out of your very busy schedule, doing really great work, to be here with us today and educate us about this very important topic that's going to affect not just us, but the future generations on the earth. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in and dropping in with us today. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. I really want to hear your feedback. To learn more about my work, visit heathergrish.com. That's Heather, GRZYCH.com. And meet me here next time on The Wisdom of the Body.